What's up, guys? Welcome into the Wolverine live recruiting show. I'm your host, EJ Holland, a recruiting insider at the Wolverine. I'm sorry about that. I think a random window popped open on my computer screen, but glad to be back for our Wednesday Q&A show talking about Michigan recruiting. Like I said on the Tuesday show yesterday, I was traveling across the country, so we had to put a pause on the YouTube shows, but we'll continue to do our normal schedule. So the Tuesday shows with Zach will be back. The Wednesday shows will be back, all official visit season long. And since it is official visit season, you'll want to subscribe to the Wolverine.com today. Use the promo code UM1 and get 2 months for $1. You get all your exclusive recruiting information, official visit intel, who's coming, where Michigan stands, and so much more. Plus, you get to be part of a great message board community with like 10,000 people. So come and use code UM1, $1 for 2 months. Get to exclusive recruiting information at thewolverine.com. And also like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel for free. All right, let's get into the questions. And first question of the day comes from Tyson Smith, and he says, will we flip Melendez? So Tyson Smith talking about Elijah Melendez on 300 Miami linebacker commit. I just had a great update on him over at thewolverine.com where he spoke extensively about a visit from Wink Martindale and Brian Jean Mary, both Michigan's new linebackers coach and defensive coordinator. Went out to Florida to see him a couple of weeks ago, and that visit went extremely well. I really like where Michigan stands here. I think it checks a lot of boxes for him. You know, Melendez is an Indiana native. He's originally from Gary. He's only lived in the state of Florida for a couple of years, so he has those Midwest ties. He's been to Michigan in the past. He really values the development. He sees himself as a scheme fit. But anytime you're talking about a kid committed to Miami, you're going to have to bring up NIL, right? And so I straight up asked Melendez about NIL. And I think, you know, to sum it up, I feel like he was a kid that wants to be at Michigan, that realizes the benefits of Michigan and the way he can be developed. But at the same time, it's hard to pass up what Miami is doing from an NIL perspective. They're obviously playing a different game than Michigan. So I think the flip is realistic. But if Michigan can just do something on the NIL side, I would feel even more optimistic here. Now, Michigan is set to get him in for an official visit on June 7th. Miami will get him on June 21st. And Melendez told me he's going to take it into the fall anyway. He's going to just kind of keep his commitment to Miami and not really make a final decision until signing day in December. So, still some work to do with Melendez, but again, I like where Michigan stands, and I'd feel better if they had a real NIL plan for recruiting. We've seen NIL improve or, really come into the forefront from a roster retention standpoint, from a transfer portal standpoint, but still a bit of a lack of a plan on the recruiting side. So that's, going to hurt with guys like Melendez that have these major NIL options. All right, Tyson Smith says, what's your go-to wing flavor? That's an interesting question. So my go-to wing flavor would probably be mango habanero. That's what I get from Wingstop all the time. I like the spiciness, but it also has a nice, sweetness to it as well. John H. Schultz says, EJ, I haven't heard a lot about defensive line recruiting recently. I saw Xavier Newsome and Amir Leonard, Gene Charles are at the Wayne State camp. Are those guys takes at this point, or will Michigan wait for others? They are not takes at this point. With Xavier Newsome, he's an in-state edge out of Detroit King. He's visited on a number of different occasions. He's a 3-star prospect. I think he's a guy that Michigan could maybe circle back to later in the process and keep warm. But just not a whole lot shaking with Xavier Newsome right now, you see Michigan as the leader on the on-3 recruiting prediction machine. If they pushed, I think he's a guy that they could get. I think they have some others ahead of him on the board right now. And Amir Leonard Jean Charles is an interesting case as well. So he's a nose prospect out of the state of Tennessee, and Michigan doesn't have a whole lot of nose prospects out there. And the Wolverines seem to be the leader for Jean Charles early on, and then they kind of stopped talking to him during the staff change. And obviously, Michigan moved from Mike Elston to Greg Scruggs to now Lou Esposito, and there just hasn't been a lot of contact lately. Now, for those of you that don't know, the Michigan staff will be at Wayne State tomorrow. So if Leonard Jean Charles, impresses Lou Esposito at the camp, maybe they'll push to get him on campus for an OV. But as of right now, nothing really shaking with either of those guys. All right, let's go to John A. Schultz. And he says, EJ, read your article a couple of weeks ago on Kamar Archie and the sit-down meeting with Jean Mary and Newsom had the sit-down meeting that Jean Mary and Newsom had with him and his family. It sounded positive. Should we have optimism? Yeah, I think so. Archie was another interesting recruitment in the sense that Michigan had the lead early, then they appeared to lose some steam. There was a drop-off in contact, but Brian Jean Mary and area recruiter Grant Newsom made it a priority to go see him and made him feel like a priority as well. And when I visited him right after that meeting, he did not have an official visit set with Michigan. Now he does for June 21st, which is Victor's weekend. In the interim, Clemson has gained some steam, and the Tigers are set to host him for an official visit this weekend. But I think Michigan can turn the tide back in their favor. What's interesting is Archie and Melendez have actually developed a friendship over social media. I think they would really like to play with each other at the next level. So that's a little tidbit to keep an eye on. Rutgers has the lead on the on-3 recruiting prediction machine, and they're doing everything they can to keep him close to home. He is set to make an OV there. But I think Michigan and Clemson are probably the two schools to watch. Texas A&M, I believe, will also get an OV. So, yeah, I think Michigan's right in the thick of things again for Archie. Johnny Schultz said, EJ, I read the Buckeyes are pushing harder for Quincy Porter since they're missing on other wide receivers targets. Could Porter's choice come down to whether or not Ohio State hits on their higher priority wide receivers? I think they would take Quincy Porter. Brian Hartline was out there when I was out there. They have more to offer on the NIL side. They're obviously pitching him pretty hard on the pass-happy offense. And I would probably give Ohio State the edge right now, even though Michigan has the lead on the on-3 recruiting prediction machine. Michigan's pitch should just be the opportunity to come in and play early. Ohio State has a pretty stacked wide receiver room already, and Michigan needs a bigger bodied guy. And I think Porter would have an opportunity to come in and make an immediate impact and potentially start as a true freshman. He's that good. And obviously, again, there's a need for a bigger bodied, true outside guy. So Porter is that. But I think the offense and the NIL are working against Michigan. So it'll be interesting to see how that recruitment turns out. Michigan, I wouldn't say Ohio State is pushing harder. Michigan is pushing as hard as it can. It's just kind of running into a speed bump in those two areas. Johnny Schultz says, EJ, did you read Kaden Strayhorn's recent comments about Michigan State recruiting? Why is he not a massive priority for them, especially since it looks like he's Michigan bound? I'm not exactly sure what's going on with Michigan State and Kaden Strayhorn. He's never seemed to really love Michigan State. Like, even early on in his recruitment, when I talked to Kaden, he never seemed fully sold on the Spartans. And of course, we're talking about three-star offensive lineman Kaden Strayhorn out of IMG Academy, whose father, Jason Strayhorn, played at Michigan State and is still an analyst for the Spartans. So, it's tough to envision Jason Strayhorn's son going to Michigan, but it looks like the Wolverines have built up some pretty good momentum here. They're set to get him in for an official visit on June 21st, and Michigan views him as the best center in the country. And I feel like I do as well. I've had a chance to see Strayhorn in game. I've had a chance to see him at practice, and he just checks a lot of boxes for me as a true center. Now, Michigan doesn't necessarily need a center. They took Jake Winera last cycle, but I think Kaden Strayhorn is as good as you can get at the position, and a guy they would make room for. And I think it would be great to add a Michigan State legacy to the fold. You already have one in Avery Gash. Why not add another in Kaden Strayhorn? But that whole Michigan State Strayhorn situation is kind of odd, but it is what it is. It opens the door for Michigan. And it's not like other schools don't like him. He has some other major offers as well. Ohio State is bringing him in for an official visit. So, I'm not sure what Michigan State is doing or, why Strayhorn's never gravitated towards them, but who cares? Let's go down to Go Blue 81. And he says, with the recent ruling by the NCAA that will allow pay for play, will that help Michigan in the 25 cycle? And will this help against other schools that do NIL better than us? Probably not this cycle. I think we need to see how it all shakes out and what the final rulings are and when or how that's going to work with the NCAA and collectives and state laws and federal laws and things that I'm not really well versed in. So I think once the dust settles, we'll have a clearer picture. And it'll probably take more into effect for Michigan in 2026. Michigan hasn't really been proactive with NIL as far as recruiting goes. It's been more reactive. So I wouldn't expect them to be out on the forefront of this as much as, that kind of sucks to hear. I would expect them to have a little bit more of a reactive approach. So I would be kind of surprised if it had any effect on 2025. But I think 2026, it'll be interesting to see how things change with the revenue sharing and things of that nature. Go Blue 81 says, is there a reason Carter Smith hasn't been invited to Elite 11? And does that speak to where he is as a quarterback prospect versus other quarterbacks in the class? The Elite 11 situation is interesting. I was at the Orlando Regional, and Carter posted one of the best scores in terms of testing. And he also, I thought, was the best 2025 quarterback there, clearly. Like, there was nobody else that was even remotely close. And no 2025 quarterback earned an invitation to the Elite 11 finals from Orlando, and that should have been Carter's. So it's just a really weird scenario. I can't get into details too much, but you'd be surprised at who wasn't in Carter's corner. But overall, it doesn't really matter. There's guys that have done extremely well at Elite 11 that haven't panned out at the next level. And when you talk about Carter Smith, you're talking about a guy who dominates on Friday nights, which is when it matters. He's the reigning Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Florida, which is not easy to accomplish. Florida is one of the best high school football playing states in America, if not the best. And he won that award as a junior, beating out Jeremiah Smith, the #1 overall recruit in last year's class, who signed with Ohio State. So, with Carter, he's a tremendous dual threat quarterback. Obviously, he can make a ton of plays with his legs. He's one of the best running quarterbacks that I've ever covered. From a throwing standpoint, I think he's gotten a lot better this offseason. You're seeing improved mechanics, throwing motion and lower body mechanics. You're seeing improved footwork. The release point's gotten better. That ball is really firing out of there. The arm strength's always been there. I mean, this is a kid that threw in the 90s as a sophomore when he was playing baseball. So again, the arm strength, the athleticism, both of those things, are there all the way. I think for Carter, this offseason is more about just honing in those things I mentioned, continuing to develop the lower body mechanics. Sometimes he uses all arm. So using his hips, getting some more hip twerk, the footwork, just setting his feet and really driving, it's improved, but it can continue to get better. He has put some more touch on his passes. He has looked a little bit more accurate. You're seeing that private training translate over to what he's doing this offseason. And so I had a chance to go out and watch Carter practice last week, and I thought he looked even better than he did at the Elite 11 regional. So he's getting better and better every time I see him, which is definitely encouraging as far as him as a pure passer. I think it's great that Michigan got a high floor guy that's, an elite level game manager in Jaden Davis, and paired that with a guy that has a super high ceiling, a little bit of a scary floor, but a really high ceiling with a just that athleticism and the ability to run, which Jaden Davis doesn't really bring. You have that in Carter Smith, so it's complementary. You have a high ceiling guy and a high floor guy. So, you could see kind of maybe a Cade McNamara, JJ McCarthy type of situation all over again. But yeah, no, I think with Carter, the Elite 11, like I said, doesn't really matter. He needs to focus more on his continued work with his quarterback trainer. He has the same trainer that worked with Brock Purdy, who obviously helped lead the San Francisco 49ers to a Super Bowl appearance. So, yeah, I think, there isn't really any reason to worry about Carter. I think he's in for a really, really good senior season. Let's go down to Go Blue 81 again. And he says, how do we stand with Dwayne Galloway and Andrew Olesh? Well, Dwayne Galloway is not on the board at all. So let's just focus in on Andrew Olesh. Top 100 tight end out of Pennsylvania. The 4 schools you see on the On3 recruiting prediction machine are the 4 schools that are basically in it. It's Penn State, Michigan, Alabama, and Florida. Now, the SEC schools are certainly intriguing, and Olesh has an eye on both Alabama and Florida. They'll both get him to campus, but I still see this as more of a Michigan-Penn State battle. Michigan is all in on Olesh. They aren't really recruiting a whole lot of other tight ends. Steve Casula did visit Dakota Terrell down in Oklahoma, Marshall Pritchett, who's committed to North Carolina, but they wouldn't take either of those guys. They are full on in on Andrew Olesh. That's the guy they want. Now, there's a lot of Penn State influence around his area, but and he's really familiar with the program. He's been to Penn State a ton, but I think the offseason visit to Michigan really opened his eyes. He's connected well with Casula, and just the tight end production and the pitch of being kind of that next Colston Loveland, that's really resonating with him. If you're a tight end, I mean, there isn't many, if any, better places to go to than Michigan. So I think Michigan, can beat out Penn State depending on how the official visits go this summer. Go Blue 81 with his last question. He said, yesterday was National Hamburger Day. Is Whataburger the best burger you've eaten? And if it's not, what is the best burger you've had? Whataburger is definitely my favorite fast food burger. It's not the best burger of all time. I feel like people get that like conflicted. Like, it's still a fast food burger, so it's not like you're getting some gourmet type of deal. But yeah, Whataburger I think is the best fast food burger for sure. Like, I've had In-N-Out and it's not good. And if we're talking about burgers and fries, the In-N-Out fries have to be the worst fries in fast food, period. Like, they are the worst things I've ever tasted in my life. If I, staying with the fast food, I don't have Whataburger where I'm at right now. So, Shake Shack probably, even though those little burgers are tiny, I think Shake Shack's better than Five Guys. But as far as like best burger, Dallas had a lot of great individual burger places, better than Chicago and better than Norfolk, where I live right now, which has basically no options. But yeah, I think, there's so many great ones in Dallas. Just, Texas as a whole is obviously a food mecca. But, if we're talking about familiarity or familiar chains, Whataburger is definitely the best out there. Nate the Great says, hey, EJ, do you think Michigan can legitimately beat out Penn State for Kainoa Winston? Seems very much like a culture fit and would fill Mike Sainristil's nickel spot perfectly. Yeah, I do think there's a good chance there. With Penn State, he's visited there so much. His cousin, KJ, is a really good player for the Nittany Lions. So the familiarity, sides with Penn State. At the same time, like you mentioned, Nate the Great, Michigan has done a fantastic job of pitching him on scheme fit and showing him what Mike Sainristil did. Kainoa, a little bit different of a build. He's generally, or he's listed at 5'10", 184, but I would say that is, giving him the benefit of the doubt. I think he's probably about 5'9.5", but he has more of a boxy build than Mike Sainer still, in the sense that he has a thick upper half, has a thick lower half already, and can continue to add weight. But he is perfect for that spot because he is such a thick, physical prospect despite being on the shorter side. When you turn on his film, he's a guy with tremendous closing speed. He's extremely physical, like plays with violence. And he's like a missile out there, man. You can just put him anywhere. You can put him at nickel. You can put him at deep safety. You can even spin him down into the box as well. But yeah, no, I think that Michigan's done a really good job of, again, selling that. And also, like you said, the culture fit. I think the spring visit really moved the needle with him. He was really impressed with what Michigan was able to offer from an academic standpoint, from a development standpoint. And he's clicked really well with the coaching staff as well. He likes Sherrone more, Lamar Morgan, Wink Martindale. So I think he's feeling more and more comfortable at Michigan, and this official visit will tell us even more about Michigan's chances to pry him away from Penn State. I just wish this visit was a little later. It always sucks to go first. Let's go down to Nate the Great again. And he says, I saw that Iverson Howard delayed his commitment from a few Fridays ago. Is Michigan feeling better about Jasper Parker? Doesn't seem like we're trending for any of the elite backs. So, yeah, I don't think they're going to end up bringing Iverson Howard in on an official visit anymore. I just don't think he's on the board, really. It didn't seem like Tony Alford was very high on him. So, yeah, I think Jasper Parker could very well be the running back in this class, 3-star back out of Louisiana. He's from the same high school that produced Ron Bellamy. And you've seen Michigan's just kind of really raised its stock in his recruitment. They are now the favorite on the On3 recruiting prediction machine with a 42.5% chance of landing him. So, yeah, I like where Michigan stands going into his official visit on June 14th. They also are bringing in Jordan Davison from California for an official visit next weekend, but I think he's Ohio State bound. Todd Robinson from the state of Georgia is coming in on June 21st, but I think that's a little bit more of an uphill battle. So Jasper Parker seems like the favorite of the official visitors. And one guy to keep an eye on the running back board is on 300 prospect Donovan Johnson. Now, he missed all of last season with an injury, but he's a guy that Tony Alford really likes. He's at IMG. And Tony Alford recently made the trip out to Florida to meet with Johnson. And they're looking to bring him in for an unofficial visit this summer and then bring him in for an official visit in the fall, since Johnson plans on making a late decision. Now, you see the heavy hitters here on the On3 recruiting prediction machine: Georgia, Florida State, South Carolina, Ohio State. I think a lot of these schools have backed off a little bit as Johnson has been recovering from that injury, but Michigan is pressing hard and making him a priority, and they would absolutely take him in the class as well. Nate the Great says, what linebackers do you think end up in the class? Well, there's really only 4 primary options at the linebacker position, and they would love to land a mixture of them. So, at the top of the board is Elijah Melendez. We talked about him earlier in the show. He's committed to Miami. Michigan working hard to flip him. You have Kamar Archie out of the Hun School on 300 prospect. Michigan had the momentum early, lost it, and now they're kind of surging back and are set to get him on campus for an OB on June 21st. Then you have Nathaniel Wusu-Boateng, another on 300 prospect out of IMG Academy. Made an unofficial visit this spring, getting back on campus for an official visit this summer, but really heated competition there with Notre Dame and Ohio State and a few others. And then you have Chase Taylor, who's a 3-star out of Georgia. He's more of a Jaden Smith from last cycle, just a really raw athlete, but long, moves well. The staff has been high on him for a while. So those are the names to know at linebacker for right now. Those are their 4 guys. If they miss out on those guys, they'll have to completely reset the linebacker board. Ava Deravanage says, how do you feel about the Andrew Babalola, 5-star offensive lineman out of Kansas? Oklahoma has the lead on the On3 recruiting prediction machine. Stanford is also very high, so OU gets his last visit, and Stanford seems to have built some momentum which is kind of a good thing if you're Michigan when you think about it, because Michigan also offers an elite education and offers much better football than Stanford does. So if the education aspect is real, if that's really what's at top of mind for Babalola, then we might be underrating Michigan's chances in this recruitment. I think until recently, he was expected to end up at OU. But now that it's gravitating a little bit more towards Stanford, I think that helps Michigan because they'll have an opportunity to really blow away Babalola and his family. They always do a great job of pitching the academic perspective. It just only hits with a certain amount of recruits for obvious reasons. And if Babalola does fall into that category, maybe Michigan can pull a surprise here. I mean, he's at the very top of the board. Grant Newsome went out there to meet with him. Offensive coordinator Kurt Campbell went out there to meet with him as well. They were able to secure an official visit during that meeting. So, yeah, I like where Michigan is in that group. This is as winnable of a five-star recruitment as you are going to get. So Michigan does have, an opportunity. I am not super optimistic as of yet, but maybe the official visit will change my mind. Borge Warner said, what top linebackers? We just kind of ran that over. Borge Warner says, are Gene, Mary, and Alfred going to pull their weight or be disappointments at recruiting? Guys, they've been here for like 3 months. Like, I don't know what you're expecting. This was a big transition cycle. Brian Gene Mary has Michigan in the mix for Elijah Melendez. He's an on 300 guy. Kamar Archie is an on 300 guy. Nathaniel Usu-Boateng, he's an on 300 guy. All those guys have been to campus. Tony Alford's gotten guys to campus. Obviously, he needs to close. But yeah, I mean, look, I think they haven't had an entire cycle here yet, so it's really hard to judge them. Gene Mary's still the same guy that pulled Junior Colson when he was here the first time. So I think both of these guys can recruit well. They just need the time, and obviously NIL is hindering Michigan across the board. I mean, what assistant would you say is pulling their weight right now? Look at the class. If you're categorizing it like that, I think they're all pulling their weight. But if you're saying these guys aren't pulling their weight, then who is? Because it's not like anybody's dominating out on the recruiting trail for Michigan right now. I think all of these guys are working as hard as they can, especially the defensive guys that have had to completely reset the boards. Guys like Lamar Morgan and Brian Gene Mary and Lou Esposito, they're playing from way behind. At least the offensive coaches were already here for the most part. So it's just a tough situation. It's just a transition cycle, and it is what it is. Let's go ahead and go down to David Mabadi, and he says, why is on 3 so much lower on the Bishop Gorman offensive lineman than the other services? I'm not exactly sure. I think they just don't value interior offensive linemen as much as maybe the other sites. It doesn't seem like they rate a lot of guard and center types very high. So when you look at Douglas Utu, he was originally listed as a tackle, and he's now projected to be more of a guard type at the next level. SJ Alatoafuli, seems like he's going to be a center. Alai kind of a Loa. I'm just butchering these names back and forth. Seems like he's more of a guard. But yeah, when you look at Utu, he's 6'3.5", so he definitely doesn't fill the tackle mold. So I think they're just grading these guys as more of interior offensive linemen, and they're not, valuing them as much. But looking at On3's ranking here, the number 19 interior offensive lineman, that's really it's really low for Utu. So, that is kind of surprising that they have that many interior offensive linemen in the On 300, and it's even more surprising they're that low on Utu. So I'm not sure. I think that Zach is really the only guy that's seen Utu lately, so maybe they just haven't gotten updated evaluations. I really don't know, since we don't handle the rankings. Butter XO said, is Jaylen Blair going to Notre Dame? I saw some predictions going that after he set his commitment date. So Jaylen has had this isn't breaking news, man. Like, Jaylen Blair has had the July 5th commitment date for months. If you go look at my original story from when he visited Michigan, like in March, he says he's committing July 5th. This isn't like anything new. I don't know why that was like reported as like breaking news. Jaylen's like set a commitment date. He's had that commitment date since literally I saw him in March. But in terms of, Notre Dame, I think it's still Notre Dame, Michigan, Penn State at the top. Steve Wiltfong did put in a prediction for Notre Dame, then immediately came on our board and said he thought that the recruitment wasn't over and that Michigan could still win him on the official visit. So it was interesting that he put in a pick for the Irish. I still think Michigan can win this recruitment. Like, I really do. Jadon's not committing until July 5th. That's been set for a long time. So it's not like he silently gave a commitment on the back end. He fits the Michigan culture. They've made him a top priority. We talk about the secondary board. It's been very murky with prospects. Jaylen Blair's always been a top priority from like the first day that Lamar Morgan arrived at Michigan. So he's also a personal favorite of defensive coordinator Wink Martindale. So I think they've really moved the needle with the scheme pitch. I think that they have done well pitching him on the culture as well. I think the unofficial moved the needle. And the good thing is Michigan gets him in for an OV after Notre Dame. Notre Dame also only gets a midweek official visit. So, it'll be a prime opportunity for Michigan to steal that momentum away from Notre Dame in June. So even though Wiltfong put in the pick, who obviously I respect a lot, I don't think this is a done deal at at all. I think Michigan can still steal this recruitment during the official visits. The only thing that gives me a little bit of pause, again, is like broken record, is NIL, just because Notre Dame seems more well-structured in that when compared to Michigan, which is crappy to say because everybody knows how much I hate Notre Dame. Let's go down to Juju, and he says, the more I see Smith, the more I think he's a better fit mentally for our system over Bryce Underwood. I think Bryce is a tremendous talent. Obviously, he's ranked as the number one quarterback in the country for a reason. But I think Carter kind of embodies that Michigan mentality, the blue-collar, hard worker guy, takes criticism well, just gets to work, loves football. So, I think he'll definitely be a great culture fit for Michigan. We are over time, guys. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Let's do rapid fire and get through these last questions. ButterXO says, how do we stand with the corners? I see a lot of visits, but no one seems to be trending towards Michigan. Yeah, corners really tough to project right now. They are working on elite prospects like top 100 South Carolina commit Shamari Earls, but they could end up with more under-the-radar guys like a Mason Alexander from Indiana or Trey Poteet from Wisconsin. So it'll be interesting to see how the corner board plays out. Blake Horlamis says, what is the major difference you see in recruiting with Sherrone more than with Jim Harbaugh? Definitely just being super aggressive. I think it's pretty noticeable how active this staff was on the road during the spring evaluation period, how involved Sherrone Moore was on spring unofficial visits. So just having a bit more of a presence. I think we'll have more details, in terms of an answer to this question once the official visits are over and we're able to see more of those differences. Blake Horlamis also says, which new position coach do you feel has the most to prove in recruiting? Probably Lamar Morgan, just because this is a strong year in the secondary. He's a guy that didn't come in with a lot of P5 experience. I've seen him get some unfair criticism so far, but really when you think about it, look, Lamar hasn't secured any commitments just yet. But the guys he's getting to campus are top-tier guys. Jordan Young's a top 100 recruit. Kainoa Winston's a top 100 recruit. Jaylen Blair is a top 100 recruit. But I think he has a lot to prove in terms of actually closing with some of these high-end guys. Blake Harlamis, again, says, if Carter Smith was a commit to another school, do you feel like he would be ranked much higher or given more hype? I mean, I try to give him as much hype as possible. I had this conversation with his dad like the other day. I'm like, I don't know why 24/7 never writes about him, but I write about Carter all the time. I try to give him his hype. And no, I mean, I don't know. I don't really buy into the, if he was committed to Ohio State or Alabama, he'd be ranked higher. Michigan, we at the Wolverine.com have the biggest site on the On3 network. So if they wanted to cater to an audience, you would think they would cater to Michigan. Ava Dedevanaj says, how do you feel about Derek Meadows, top 100 wide receiver, heavily favored to end up at Notre Dame? He is officially visiting Michigan this weekend. I feel pessimistic. I think NIL will probably be a factor in this recruitment, Michigan hasn't done well landing elite receivers. They got in this recruitment a little late. He does have some Midwest ties, but yeah, I don't really see it happening unless they just absolutely knock it out of the park when it comes to his official visit this weekend. Theodore Dodge says, EJ question, Bryce Underwood recently said he chose LSU because they had better development at the quarterback position. Do you think he's right? I think recently with Jaden Daniels and Joe Burrow, they've shown an exciting passing attack, and that certainly excites a guy like Bryce Underwood. But also, I mean, we all know what went down in that recruitment. So, yeah, I mean, NIL was obviously a factor as well. But I don't think Bryce was lying in terms of, that being a factor as well. I think he wanted to play in more of a pass-happy offense. And I also think he just wanted to get away from home. So I think a combination of all those factors played a role in his decision. Sean Paul Anthony with the last question of the night. He says, now that our stuff is together, Ewald said he'd come back more or less. His recruitment is open again. Kind of. Is he lying? There just hasn't been much movement with Chris Ewald. I don't really see him ending up at Michigan. I guess you never know, but I'd highly doubt it. Miami is the heavy favorite in that recruitment. And yeah, I mean, I probably would side with the Hurricanes as well. And I think with Sean Paul, he says our stuff is together. I know there was a report that Michigan's got its stuff together, but how many times have we heard the same thing? Well, Michigan, big NIL news, things coming soon. Until we actually see results on the recruiting trail, then Michigan doesn't have its stuff together. It's all just a bunch of propaganda. Let's go down to Theodore Dodge, and he says, EJ, Michigan and Valiant Management Group set to partner with national firm in a significant move. How many times have we heard significant move for Michigan NIL? Look, Michigan has done a fantastic job with roster retention. They've done a really good job with portal. This has had no effect on Michigan's approach to high school recruiting. So in terms of, do I know any details? From a recruiting perspective, we need to see results. We've heard significant news. We've heard things are coming soon over and over and over for years, not just weeks or months, like years. So until something changes, until Michigan starts getting, top 12 classes even, because right now they're hovering around 15 again. They finished 15 last year. They finished like 18 the year before that. So once they're, making headway on the actual recruiting trail, once they're landing a few top 100 recruits, then I'll believe it when it happens. Like Corey G says, I'll believe it when I see it. I personally am sick of it's coming soon and big news, significant change, significant deal. It's not significant until you prove it with some results. Land some top 100 recruits and then come back to me. All right, now subscribe to thewolverine.com and get your official visit intel today. Use the promo code UM1 and get 2 months for $1 and get everything you need from official visit season. Also, like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for free. We will see you next week to recap the first wave of official visitors.